and all of a sudden Tommy throws over the table and chair. Okay? The tendency for most teachers is to say, "What? You got to pick that up." But you know, with an EBD kid, that might not be a smart move. You know, because he's going to say "fuck you." That's one thing, and then it's going to be some other things that might happen with this. And here's the kicker: he can only get suspended for 10 days. He can only get suspended for 10 days. Clock the teacher. He can only get suspended for 10 days. Yeah. You know why? Because in that situation, because he has EBD, he was triggered. He was responding to a trigger. So we get it all the time. And here in County, for sure, we get it all the time. Teacher want that kid out, but the teacher triggered the kid into doing it. Right, so that's, you know, that's just one of the things. The kid will throw the table and chair down, and so we have to make sure that we are careful about what we say to them and the way that we say it. And really, my technique was to model. It's simple for me. It's just my technique was to model. So when they cursed me out, I didn't curse them back out. F you, Mr. Wortham. Hey man, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's just how I dealt with it. I didn't, you know, because a lot of times, I'm telling you, when young people say stuff, they're anticipating you saying something back in a more aggressive way than they say it to you. They are. And so my strategy was not to give them that. And so I would give them something else. And it actually ended up working for those students. Okay? So these are kids, young people that you'll probably see, especially if you're working in the school system, you're going to see students that have EBD. Now, I want to ask this question in a way: have anybody here ever worked with a student that sounds like the emotional type? Anybody here ever worked with a student like that? Or had to deal with one? Oh man, Rockdale County is pretty good, man. They don't have them kind of issues we have in Henry County, man. I mean, we probably would have had 12 police officers. Amen to me, tell mine. Because, yes.
In the Hancock County, and it's a very small town, and there's not much for kids to do there. So, of course, and plus there's a lot of whatever happened to stays here. So that's how I really took account into it.
Right.
But I was called to the school like every single day, just to figure out what's going on with this kid, between this kid, between this teacher and that teacher. Like I dealt with that, but that was some time ago.
Oh, okay. Okay. But I mean, more than likely, a lot of times, if you know, if you're going to a school, or sometimes if you're going to deal with something in an apartment or something like that, we tend to see more and more young people that are involved. And a lot of times, you can come across somebody that has, you know, a mental health issue and may be in a crisis situation. That's what this is all about, you know, crisis intervention. That's what it's about, because you will experience people that have that. Thank you for sharing. Now, the treatment, like now, for my students, most of them will have to be medicated, okay? Because if they have EBD, the chances are they're going to have something to go with it. Bipolar, okay, schizoaffective, some kind of other thing that's probably going to be that. And some of them might have even like a processing difficulties. You know, they have a big problem in processing things, you know, in the time that teachers want them to. You know, if you give them extra time, that's what we do to them, give them extra time, they can do the same thing. But some of them have difficulties like that. So, really, you know, what you want to do is, for me, I want to get them calm enough to teach them the strategies that they need to deal with the emotions that they have. Okay? And the only way that I can do that for some of them, like that young lady, she had to be on medication because it was impossible for me to get her calm enough to, you know, learn the strategies that I needed her to learn. But now, this is the extra step that I made. I always made sure, because a lot of parents didn't want their kids to be on medication. And so the thing that I did is I also got the trust of the parents too by sharing with them. I don't want her to be on medication either. I don't. But unfortunately, right now, if I'm going to be effective in helping her, then we have to do something to calm her down so I can teach her. And so what I promise my parents is, whenever I see something that's not right, because this is why parents are afraid to let them take medication, because it's true. Some of this medication will have them looking like a zombie. And see, I don't want that either. Because if they're in that state, I can't teach them. So that's the agreement that I make with parents. When I see them come in that state of mind, then you're going to have to call your doctor and say, hey, that's way too much. And then that means they can wean them off of it. But I'm going to be honest with you, most of my students, by the time they get in the 8th grade, if they've been with me since 6th and 7th grade, most of the time, when they get in the 8th grade, they're not in my class anymore. That's the goal for me. That's the goal for me, is to make sure that they're not in there, because this is, once they get in high school and they have to be in a setting like this, only 20% of them graduate from high school. Okay? 80% of my students graduate from high school. You know, and that's just why, because I try to do a good job of making sure they understand that you don't want to keep being in here in the 8th grade. You don't. And I have a program, an incentive program, that helps them to be motivated to do it. Because we turn up. That's how I ended up listening to Nudie and Thug, all of those, is because I wanted to find a way to reach my students. And I knew that hip-hop was a thing for them. They liked to turn up. They liked the technology. And what I did is I set up my system to say, if you give me what I want, Monday through Thursday, Friday we're going to turn up. And I got away with it. And the reason I got away with it is because of what? Somebody tell me why I got away with it.
Work. Said it worked.
Yeah, and it can't just work, but you have to show the data that proves that it works. That's what I was good at. Look, when they started, he only made, because they had to make at least, 80 points out of 100 that they can make a week, right? So I had a baseline where they start. So if a kid started and they only made 50 points that first week, and then the points start increasing, that shows what? Improvement. Okay, so I was able to go to administration and say, hey man, these kids are doing good. And I even had the system set up to where they can earn a class out at a time. Okay? Numbers are doing good. You're giving me 80 at least for 2 months. Hey man, let's try PE. I didn't want to, I got to try them in something like that first, to make sure it's going to work out. And then 3 weeks, keep making 80. Oh man, let's go to language arts. No, 3 more weeks, 80. Ah man, I think you're ready for science. Okay, 3 more weeks. Oh man, social studies. Notice I put math last. Because a lot of my students think they don't like math. I have to deal with that mentality about math. But that's how it works. I created an incentive program that, you know, they got rewarded, they got to turn up. Not only did they get to turn up, but I had a store in the classroom, a store, that my principal was able to get Publix, Walmart, all of these people were giving me stuff, gift cards, all of that, because she went out and said, hey, I got this guy that's amazing in this classroom, and he needs stuff to give away. And they gave me a lot of stuff. I had a store. And that's what they got the opportunity to do. In the store, guess what? The store was made of things that they told me the first day of school that they were willing to work for. And so, you know, that's kind of like how the program worked for me. And I like sharing that because, you know, that's what I do. I try to help teachers now. I have a classroom management program that I teach, that I work with teachers with now. And I like sharing that because it can be successful no matter where you are. And the reason I know that is because I spent most of my time in Henry County, but I chose to go 1 year to DeKalb County, and I chose to go another year to Clayton County. And I went to the tough schools in both of those counties. And I did that because I knew that when I was working on my teacher classroom management program, I knew that I was going to have that teacher that raised their hand and say, well, you did that in Henry County. I'm in DeKalb. And guess what? Every single time I do one, I get that one teacher that says that was Henry County. And I'm able to tell them I had the same success in DeKalb. In DeKalb, where most of my students were homeless. They were considered homeless because they most of them lived in the hotels over there. And I remember that snow, because that's when I was working there, when we had that, the snow thing that happened while everybody was at work and a lot of kids, bus drivers got left stranded on the highway. See, we saw it. And we were trying to figure out, let's get these kids home now when it was, you know, coming down just a little bit. But one of the things that the principal wanted to do is she said, we have to feed these babies before we let them go home. And it made us nervous because you know, it looked like it was getting harder and harder. But her compassion was, because we have such a homeless base, that I got to feed them before I let them. Okay. And so, but my program worked there. I got to be honest though. She got over on me. She really did. And I tried to get out of the contract because she got over on me. And I'm going to say this will be the last thing I say. I'm going to let you ask questions. But this is how she got over on me. I am a EBD teacher. I don't do anything else. Now, I do have to teach science, math, social studies. I have to teach all the subjects. But I am specifically a behavior specialist. So when I interviewed for the job, it was for a behavior specialist, right? And I made sure that I asked her, all of these students have EBD, right? And she said, oh, yeah. Well, when I started that Monday morning, I knew I had got duped. I knew it. You know, I had a few students that were MID, mild intellectual disability. See, that's the difference. Mild intellectual disability. Now, we used to call that mental retardation, but we don't call it that anymore because that's harsh. But a couple of the students had mild intellectual disability. Okay? I had one kid that was autistic, and then I had one that was probably just BAD, you know, but he took care of himself. And so, that's a tough environment. That's a tough environment. Because I know how to get EBD students straight. Because they don't have the intellectual disability. They just have the behavior. So I work on the behavior. The MID student is probably, they're in the 6th grade, but they're on a 1st grade level. Which makes it difficult for me to have all of those different students in the classroom, and I did. I called the superintendent and I said, hey man, this is, y'all lied. And he basically said, I don't care, you still gotta stay there. You know, and I did. I ended up finishing the year, but guess what? I was even successful doing that because once I had, this little page stuff where I could have called lawyers, but I just buckled down and say, hey, let me see, let me try it. And sure enough, it worked. And let me tell you how I know it worked. The principal, teachers have to sign their contract for the next year at the end of February, right? When she, she told me that I couldn't leave, I told her, I said, don't bother to give me no contract because I'm gonna do this and I'm gone back to Henry County. The contract expired 12 o'clock midnight. I get a phone call at 11:30 at night. And I usually don't answer call that late, but I did. And it was the principal saying, I noticed that you haven't signed your contract and it's almost midnight. And it took me a minute. I was silent for a minute. It was like she didn't get it. But I just reminded her, you remember when I told you set me up and I was not going to sign another contract? I kept my word. That's all. But she was begging for me to come back because I had did such a great job with that classroom. Okay. So, the bottom line, I'm giving you guys some perspective that a lot of people can't do because I've been in there. I've worked with those students and I even see what you're going to learn here, how to be non-aggressive, how to be proactive. All of those things, I'm telling you, they work. People assume that because I'm a big guy, they assume that I was in the class, throwing my students around. And that's how I got them to behave. But it was the exact opposite. Okay, I showed them a better way. I didn't do and respond to them the same way that they came at me. I could have, but I chose to do it the other way. Let me tell you, with an 80% graduation rate and still going, because I still got a few classes that haven't graduated yet, and I'm expecting the same thing, it tells me that it works. Okay? Anybody got any questions for me? All right.
Did the CAP continue with your program after you left? Did they get somebody else to teach the way you taught?
Man. Oh, you're talking about in the CAB.
Right, have they expanded it?
Man, I don't know what
I mean,
the CAB
there's only
is.
one of you, and there's many kids.
Like I told her, I didn't want nothing else to do with the CAB because they lied to me.
Right, but how can we expand what you teach? Forget about what the CAB lied, but it's still the program. The program you have is the first program I've heard ever.
Right, and that's the thing, man. I've talked to a lot of people in DeKalb County about how I can help them. I talked to a lot of people in Clayton County about how I can help them. And right now, they think they're doing good. Henry County doesn't. Henry County has accepted a lot of things that we do. The NAMI stuff, working with the kids. Henry County has accepted a lot of stuff because Henry County realized, man, we got to do something. But Clayton and DeKalb, man, I'm sorry to say it, but they they're not as vested in doing things that really are going to help their system get better. Yeah.
So have you reached out to other schools, or was just that one school?
I talked to some people that were like in the office, like the county office and stuff like that. Now, I have a new contact because my principal now, Dr. Kimberly Anderson, is like, she's assistant superintendent or something like that now. So my plan is to, go back now and approach her. I'm surprised she haven't called me yet, but we're going to make contact because she decided to leave Henry County when they offered her assistant superintendent job.
And what was the age group again?
The kids that I teach, middle school. Yeah, I mean, I've taught at every level, but my favorite and the one I keep choosing is middle school.
Okay.
And it's a reason, because what's happening at middle school?
Right. No, because I actually know a principal that teaches in middle school in my precinct that probably would be interested. That's why I asked.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get that.
Yeah, I do. I have some cards that I'm going to pass around as well, because believe me, man, I really do want to help people get better. I really do. I mean, I gotta make a living off of it, but it's really my passion. It really is. I know what works. But, you know, I have to be dealing with people that are interested in trying to do things that work and not just traditional, not just political. Okay, I gotta have people, because what I did in the classroom, man, you know, a lot of teachers are scared to do that. I played hip hop, the clean version. I did all of it, because that's what they asked me. What happens if the principal come in and do an observation while you're doing that? I said, for 13 years, they walked out and said, good job, Mr. Worthy. The reason why is because my numbers were really, really good. You know, and that was compared to regular ed students. You know, and this, I know I'm taking y'all all the time, but when I was in DeKalb County, I had a kid. Nobody wanted to deal with this kid, right? Because he's one of those kids, he want to run everything, he want to control everything, you know, and the other kids don't like him. And even sometimes he get on the teacher's nerve, you know, because he's a talker, and but he's smart. He's a genius. That kind of smart. You know, so I taught him some strategies. I said, hey man, you are a leader. Okay? But I want you to be a servant leader. You know, not a leader that want to force everybody to do things. Be a leader that shows them how to do it. You know, and I just kept reminding him every day. We talked about it. We met every week. This guy took the test. Back then we was taking the what's the last crap test we was taking? Whatever it was. This kid made the highest score in the whole school.
SAT?
No, it was middle school.
Oh.
We was, yeah, that one, CRCT. He scored the highest score in the whole school. And my numbers look ridiculous because of him. And guess what happened? All the teachers, they saw I had got him better. And they said, Mr. Worthy, he can come back to the class whenever he wants to. You know, because they wanted those numbers. And I wouldn't give them those numbers. I kept them. You know, so it's just, you know, it works just to that degree. A kid that, you know, nobody could, even the students couldn't stand, went from being a kid that learned how to tap into his talent. Because he is a leader. He is. He just don't understand leadership. And so I had to teach him what true leadership was. That's all. He's just like a lot of people that think they lead. Tell everybody to do what, you know, tell everybody what to do. Do this, do that. Real leader shows people by example how to get to where they want to be. That's what I do. Okay? Any other questions?
Yeah. Tell us just real briefly, and I'm not trying to sell his book, he does it himself, I promise you, but tell him your two books, and the third one, tell him why you do, because you had a real good explanation of that last time.
Right. Well, the first book I wrote was called, because see, when you think about it, my goal is to help people realize the greatness that they have within themselves. You know, you don't have to get it from anywhere. It's here, but it has to be developed, right? And so I've discovered things that prevent us from being our best self. Addictions, you know, behaviors, lack of self-control, lack of self-esteem, all of those things prevent us from being our best self. And so what I did is I do seminars and I wrote books based on those things. My first book was called From Dependency to Freedom, but I Still Must Fight. That was a book I wrote to people that struggle with drug and alcohol addiction. And I wanted them to understand that you can do it. You can be a person that, you know, comes from being dependent. You have to have drugs, alcohol for everything, to do everything, to being free, but it's still some work that got to be done. It's a fight for the rest of your life. So that's why I had to put, you know, from dependency to freedom, but I still must fight. And that's what the book is doing. It's taking you through that journey, basically of my journey and the research that I did, because I wanted to make sure that what I was saying was relevant to today because, you know, I overcame like 30 years ago. You know, that's how old I am. And so I wanted to make sure that it was relevant. So I went to AA classes, I went to NA classes, and I realized that they were saying, you know, they were saying the same thing. So I wrote the book based on levels, like level 1, where you start with the addiction, and you go all the way up to level 12, what I call becoming a mountain mover. Because that's what I discovered. When I overcame my addiction, I discovered that I believe I can do anything that I put my mind to. And so that's why, you know, chapter 12 is becoming a mountain mover. Okay? But it talks about all those other levels that I had to climb up, though, to get to being that mountain mover. The next book, I wrote that based on dealing with my students. You know, I found out that a lot of them just didn't believe in their abilities. They didn't think that they had the ability to do great things, you know. So we were trying to teach them math and science when a lot of them already had their minds made up that I'm gonna work in construction like my dad. I'm gonna drive a truck like my dad. You know, they had all these built-in notions, and so when you're trying to teach them math and science, they don't see the need for it. So one of the things that I had to do is work on their mindset. And so, you know, my second book was called The Immaculate Concept of Men. Okay? When I learned how to change my perspective of how I see men, everything changes. Okay? That's what that one's about. And the one I'm working on now is called Don't Let Your Highs Be Too High and Your Lows Be Too Low. And it's based on what I've learned that has helped me and guided me, that has allowed me to be able to, I can work with anybody. I can speak to anybody. I can go to any church, okay, and I can speak a word.